Well, it looks as if when University of Portland's experience included blowing your arm out, that dream of being a major leaguer was gone. Just to share, I always wanted to be a major leaguer too. There was no question I wanted to catch in the major leagues. I dreamed about it. I daydreamed about it till my junior summer when I was on an American Legion team from Madison that won the World Series, and I was playing as well as I humanly could. And I had a particularly good game beating California in the regionals. Guy tried to steal and I threw him out, and I got a couple base hits off a good guy, and I'm feeling pretty good. And after the game, there's scouts everywhere, and Jimmy Officer was standing to my left and Tom Weiss to my right, and they are about a head taller than me. And the scouts were just busting them with questions and information, and they didn't seem to even know I was there. It kind of dawned on me, if my best doesn't even warrant a question, if I'm going to stay with baseball, it's probably going to be coaching. So going into that, what is the story of after U of P, how you got the job at Madison? What was that journey from the end of college to getting hired at Madison High School at the age of 24 as the head baseball coach?
I don't know. There's no way to explain it except it's like an old boxer, Rocky Graziano, used to say, somebody up there likes me. I think God had a hand in, if you look at the job that was available, the best baseball job in Portland Public Schools is open. And they've got all these coaches, Andy Pianovi, Roy Harrington, Jack Dunn, Bob Webster, Vince Pesky, all the established coaches. One of them's going to grab that job. They're not going to offer it to a rookie. And when I had graduated from college and during my 1 year of substituting at Jeff, I was advised, anytime a job opens up, throw your hat in the ring. You're not going to get the job, but at least you get your name out there and people know that you're available, and maybe, something will work out with the JV. Or you have to start at the bottom and work your way up, which I understand. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. So I applied for the Marshall job, and Vince Pesky got it, which he should have. And but I was aggravated at that because the principal called me in during Christmas vacation for an interview. And then when I went into the interview, he bawled me out for coming in to interview. He said, you can't expect to get the job like this without any experience. And I agreed with it, but I thought, well, why bother calling me in and taking time away? Anyway, I was an assigned substitute at Jeff. They transferred me to Madison. In Madison, I didn't have any coaching. I was teaching social studies. I was assistant. They asked me late in the fall rather, if I would assist in basketball. So I became connected with Don Gasaway, which was a plus for me. He was a social studies teacher, history teacher, and helped me along in getting my feet wet in the classroom. And anyway, that spring, they came to my classroom and asked me if I wanted to stay at Madison. They could give me the head baseball job. That just doesn't happen to a rookie. I had never coached a baseball team in my life when I got the Madison job. And Jefferson had offered me that if I wanted to come back over there, I could coach JV baseball and JV basketball, and I could teach PE full time. Well, in Portland at that time, you spent 3 years on probation as a teacher, and I was out of my field. My minor field was history, but my major was PE, And so I was going to be teaching in my minor field and coaching a varsity team in a hotbed of baseball where I had never coached a baseball team before. So I was really torn. I remember, here's where I have to mention my wife. We were married, of course, at that time, and we prayed together, should I go to Jeff or should I stay at Madison? And I knew right away what I was supposed to do. The GPS inside me said, you stay at Madison. But I didn't want to teach history. And I didn't want to get into a hotbed of a bunch of dads jumping on me because, you know, most of those had as much experience well, they had more experience in coaching baseball than I did. I played it, but I never coached it. So I said, the smart thing to do is go to Jeff, get my feet wet, cut my teeth, and I can teach him my major field. I won't lose my teaching job over being inadequate in the classroom. And anyway, Don Gasaway comes along and says, I'll help you. I'll help you get going. And bless his heart. And he counseled me a little bit in saying, maybe you know, if you teach PE, you're down there in the gym all day long, then you have 2 more hours of baseball coaching or basketball. You get tired of being down in that locker room all day. Mm-hmm. It's kind of nice to change gears, teach in the classroom, see the students at this level, then see it. And that made some sense too. Well, anyway, in those days, Portland had the principals would meet and decide on the transfers as to who was going to be allowed to transfer and not. I had put in for a transfer to Jeff. Steve Smith, the principal, came to my room that afternoon and said, we have the meeting tonight. Should I put your transfer in or not? Do you want to stay here or go there? I said, I'll go to Jeff. He said, okay. And he said, he pulled out his card and he said, if you change your mind before 6:30, here's my card, call me because I'm going to that meeting and we're going to put the transfers through. We'll make our trades. Okay, so I went home. Nancy and I were going to a friend's house for dinner. We went over to their house. I'll never forget walking in. We got her up to the table to eat dinner. Before we sat down, she looked at me. I don't know how a woman can stand that. You know, to say, well, whatever you decide, that's okay. I'm with you. I'll back you up. She said, well, what did you decide? And I said, I'm going to Jeff. Whew. I never saw those blue eyes so disappointed in my life that I thought, I knew I was making a mistake. I knew I was wrong. My internal Holy Spirit, I say, but the GPS was telling me, I want you at Jeff or at Madison. So anyway, I got up from the table, walked over to the phone and called, and his wife, Mrs. Smith, answered the phone, said, no, he's gone to the meeting. My heart fell again. And she said, I told her who I was and what I wanted, and she said, just a minute, let me see. She went out in the garage and he was still there. So she called him in and I told him my situation. I said, I've changed my mind, I want to stay. It's a wonder he didn't say, you idiot, you don't know what you're doing. You know, I'm offering you a plum and you're turning it down and now you're, you know, he had every reason to dump me, but he didn't. And I always admired him for that. I appreciate it. But anyway, I stayed at Madison, and the rest of it was, we won the city championship, went to the finals that first year. And the second year we went to quarterfinals, and then we won it in 63 and 64.
And that was your 4-year stint?
That was my 4 years. Then I quit.
Well, before we talk about quitting, you're bringing up my decision to come to Madison as a coach, because I had gone out of that Legion experience, saying, I think teaching and coaching is a possibility. It became a reality. And I was at Canby, and I'd coached 7th grade baseball, JV baseball, taken over the varsity team at 24 or 23 because they didn't have too many applicants. They just stunk. I mean, their facility was terrible, and when I was coaching JV, the varsity was like 3-23, and the only games they won were against teams in lower classifications. But there was some good talent there. And my second year there, we had just won the Coast Valley League Championship against a really good St. Helens team that was ranked 3rd in state. And we were entering into Canby with a police and fire escort. And I had just had my first child. We had just bought a home. We'd rebuilt the field. And I walked in the door thinking, wow, how blessed am I to be at Canby. And the phone's ringing. And I pick it up, and it's Dick McLean, my high school coach, saying the Madison job is open. I've already talked to Bill. You need to call. And I went into that interview, and Tom Treblehorn and Tom Campbell were there, and I was like 25. And it's like, well, this will just be an experience interviewing, because who's going to hire me over those guys? Well, you did with Harold Anderson.
Oh.
And that's kind of how I ended up getting led, without really looking for it, to an opportunity that seemed like it was too early and all of that. But let's get back to, I mean, your 4-year run at Madison, young as you were, couldn't have gone any better. You were absolutely in your coaching prime. So what happened? Because I know how loaded the future was. I know what was coming out of Madison Babe Ruth, because my peers and the peers before me were coming. And we won the state title in 69 and 70, and we won the American Legion World Series. As good as Rick and Lampard and those guys were, we were that good. And maybe as all-around athletes, better, because the basketball team was a state runner-up, golf won it. It was probably as good as Madison ever was. And you saw that coming. You had it coming. What's the story?
Well, the team that won it, the last team I coached in '64, I coached 1 year in '73 again. We couldn't hire a coach, so they let me coach. But in '64, we won it again, the second one, and that was with the junior pitching staff. Steve Chamberlain was a junior, Lay was a junior. I knew I had those two coming back in '65. I wanted to take another shot at it.
I'm sure you did.
Again, Dick McLean was there, and I knew we were going to lose him if we didn't find a place for him. But the other aspect of it, I had already, in the December of '63, I resigned as baseball coach. They fired the basketball coach, which I thought was really an unfair decision. And I know the principal in every school has the right to hire and fire. I didn't have any right to challenge that. I admit that. But I had done my student teaching under Paul McCall at Grant, who was in his heyday at basketball. He knew basketball. And I worked with John Neely when he had Terry Baker and that bunch in my 1 year at Jeff. And I volunteered so I could learn basketball coaching technique from him. And the Madison coach, Don Gasway, was every bit the coach that they were. But he didn't have the pieces. Oh, he had individuals here and there, but you need 5, and he didn't have it. He lost the first 2 games of the season, and they fired him. in December. And so I thought, this is really unfair. I don't want to coach in a school where winning is the goal. I want to win, yes. I think I proved my first 3 years that I want to win. I'm going to compete. But teaching while competing is more important. My values were, if I have to look over my shoulder and worry about getting fired because a student breaks a training rule or does something stupid that hurts the team, and I bench him, I don't want to get fired because we lose a ball game. I want to teach that kid, and in teaching that kid, I'm teaching how many others that there are rules to life, and there are standards, there are guardrails, and you're going to live within them, or you're not going to play here. And so I gave him my resume. I said, I'm resigning, and I'll coach in the spring, because I know in the middle of the school year you don't go out and hire somebody. But in June I'm done. So we won the state championship, and I retired, and we announced Dick McLean as the head coach. And the next year I didn't coach anything. I was just teaching social studies. And I had resigned due to the fact that either I'll find somebody will come calling that wants a coach who puts values ahead of winning, or I won't coach. I enjoyed my teaching. By that time I had gone back and picked up a major in history, and thanks to Gasaway, I love teaching in the classroom. And if I'm just going to teach, that's wonderful. So I resigned, and in 1965 I wasn't involved in athletics.
So it's kind of by experience, I learned from that and from you that if you're going to do it right, you're going to worry about the kids' long-term integrity and character development, which is the ultimate goal of sport.
Yeah, it ought to be.
It ought to be. And if winning gets ahead of that, somehow we're putting the cart before the horse. And to be honest, we can do more harm than good.
Well, it's amazing how many times, I don't want to go into specifics, but people, when you do things like that, for example, well, one year I had to bench a kid because he skipped practice the day before a big quarterfinal baseball game. We got calls. They said we got calls. I don't know if we did. But they said the central office is calling and they want you to play the kid. And no, I'm not going to play. He's not going to play. And so, well, what if I tell you that he has to play? And I said, well, if that's the case, somebody else will coach. I'll watch. But I'm not going to coach a team and have the kids running the show. And so nothing more was said. We played. We won the ball game, fortunately. But it's sometimes leadership, higher ups. Now, I know it wasn't from the central office. Paul McCall would never have said, you play the kid. I know that. But when I stopped and thought about it, I thought, when they say downtown is calling, the central office, that can be anybody. Tell me who.
Right.
And I never knew who that was, but we did get questions like that. And as a coach, you have to decide, is this job more important to me than doing what the right thing is in the long term for this kid? And I had maybe I use that example. I was at Burgerville years later when I became athletic director, selling ads for our football program. And I walked in there was waiting for the manager to come to the front and give me the ad copy. While I was standing there waiting, there was this fellow a young man standing over there, and he looked like he lived in the gutter all night long. He The drool was going out the side of his mouth. His face was dirty. His clothes were torn. And he looked over at me and he said, "Are you Mr. Wiitala?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he turned around to the people in the Burgerville and he yells out so everybody can hear, "This is the most unfair man I've ever met in my life." That was really embarrassing to me. I thought, well, where did I didn't recognize him. When was I so unfair to him? You know, and pretty soon he says, "You cut me from the baseball team." The light went on. He had come into Madison he was known around the community as a three-sport, four-star athlete. But he was a spoiled kid. He was into drugs. He was doing things his way. Nobody could corral him. We tried, coaches did everything we could, teachers, counselors, to try to get him into a mold where we could work with him. But he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And so he ends up living this kind of life. And I say, you're not going to win them all. You're going to lose some.
Yeah.
But you can't let that one who refuses to accept the guardrails, you can't let him ruin the whole box of basket of apples. And I hated it. You know, yeah, we lost him and it hurt. I wanted to grab him and pull him and say, "If you only knew how bad we wanted to save you, get you into the program, but you wouldn't listen."
Well, I think it's important that on the one hand, you want to, as a coach and teacher, save everybody.
Yeah.
You do. You want everyone to benefit from the experience. But if you go so far as to lower your standards to keep kids involved, all of a sudden being part of those standards doesn't have any lasting value. It's you got to care to save everybody, but it only helps the kids if the standards stay high enough. I remember the first thing I did as Madison's baseball coach was dismiss 2 of my top 3 pitchers in 1979, dismissed 2 of them, and the starting catcher because of rule infractions. And the standards didn't move. And the choice would have been try to modify the standards because they were excellent players. But in the long run, we'd be cutting off our nose to save our face. And in the long run, one of the young men that I cut was the best pitcher in the state of Oregon 2 years later and pitched a state championship game and won it. And as a result of having to meet those standards and stay on top of them, his grades went up. He became one of the best teammates I've ever seen, Richie Rosemus, and he's in the PIL Hall of Fame. You know, and if you don't keep the standards high enough to be worthy of attaining, and where I learned that was from you.
Can I backtrack a little bit?
Sure, please.
The first year of coaching, here I'm just a dumb rookie, and we play the first 2 games in the PIL season, we lose. The third game, we're behind 7-3. And I have a player who loafs after a fly ball. Didn't make a real effort for it. I benched him. And eventually I put in Ron Lucas, a shortstop, a sophomore, put him in the game. We came back and won that game 10-7, and we didn't lose again until we played the semifinal, and then we got, after we beat Beaverton, they protested because he was had transferred from Central Catholic to Madison. Not his fault at all. It was our fault. The eligibility list was not checked properly, but he was honest. So I can't blame him one bit. Anyway, right there, from the time we benched the one player who was the best player on the team, we didn't lose again. That kid quit, never came back. But how important team chemistry is. Everybody else who just, you mean we all have to, we have to produce? If he loafs and gets benched, I'm next. Better hustle. I think team chemistry is so important.
Yeah.
And it's one of the blessings I had, like Keith Lampard, I always say, as a senior, he could do about anything he wanted to, and he was good enough to play. As a hitter, as a pitcher, he never lost a game as a varsity pitcher. But he worked harder than anybody on the team at staying, getting ready, and preparing for the next game. And his leadership, it rubbed off on the younger kids. If he's out there running that hard, I better get to it.
Well,
that's leadership.
See, you're reminded me of another thing that was just part of my DNA from being a Madison guy. Because honestly, I won a lot of high school games, but all I did was bring Madison to Lake Ridge, of all places, and then Madison to Astoria. Nothing changed with the standards and the approach. It was, this is what we're going to do. This is the standard we're going to hit. These are the guardrails. You meet them, bet you anything will be good. But one thing that came out of that, when you were a junior, you had better talent at Roosevelt. But something was happening with that senior leadership. Your first state champion, here your best players are your hardest workers. How can anything happen but good if your best players are leading not just by their ability to play, but by their respect for your standards and their respect for hustling and doing the very best they can every day.
And treating the lesser talent with respect.
With
and
respect.
Help. The younger kids loved Lampard because he'd encourage them. And not, they strike out, so what? He understood what it was. He struck out, but not often.
No.
And
no, it's the best. The best way to have a real team is to have everybody rooting for the people on the field, not hoping they fail. But that's easier said than done. It doesn't happen if one, there aren't standards there, and two, your best players aren't worth rooting for, and they got to respect. They got to respect everyone on the team.